Kenya's Standard Gauge Railway, SGR, is one of the biggest and most expensive projects ever built in Kenya. The modern railway connects the port of city of Mombasa to Nairobi, promising faster travel, better trade, and a new future of transport in the country. But behind the modern trains and shiny stations is a story many people don't know. A story of huge loans, controversial contracts, and families whose homes were demolished to make way for the railway.
And a private school in Baruk, Gilgil is among tens of structures that have been brought down in demolitions by the Kenya Railways Corporation, meant to reclaim land.
From the Colonial Railway, once mocked as the lunatic line, to a multi-billion shillings mega project, this is the power story of Kenya Railways, a railway that helped build a nation but also came with serious challenges along the way. The history of Kenya Railways begins with the construction of the Uganda Railway, initiated by the British colonial government in 1896. The primary objective of the railway was strategic and economic, to secure British control over East Africa and provide access from the Indian Ocean coast to the interior, particularly Uganda. Construction began at the port of Mombasa and advanced inland toward Lake Victoria. To build the railway, the British government recruited more than 30,000 laborers from British India, mainly because of their experience with railway construction. These workers faced severe conditions, including tropical diseases such as malaria and dysentery, extreme heat, inadequate medical care, and difficult terrain. One of the most documented challenges occurred in 1898, where two man-eating lions, later known as servo lions, killed a number of workers. This incident caused delays and fear among laborers before the animals were eventually killed. Despite opposition in Britain, where critics labeled the project the lunatic line due to its high cost and uncertain returns, construction continued. The railway reached Kisumu, then Port Florence, on Lake Victoria in 1901, completing a journey of approximately 1,060 kilometers. Along the railway line, settlements emerged to support construction and operations. One such settlement, originally established as a railway depot in 1899, later developed into the city of Nairobi, which became the capital of the British East Africa in 1907. By 1901, the Uganda Railway had fundamentally altered the region's geography, economy, and settlement patterns. It enabled the movement of goods, people, and colonial administration, laying the foundation of what would later evolve into Kenya's national railway system. But before we continue, if you find this video interesting, make sure to like and subscribe for more captivating stories. In 1963, Kenya gained independence, and the railway system, once a symbol of colonial control, became a national asset managed by the Kenya Railways. For the first time, a Kenyan-led administration assumed full responsibility of running the trains, overseeing freight and passenger operations across the country. The railway was recognized as a vital artery connecting the port of Mombasa on the Indian Ocean to the inland towns and cities, facilitating trade, transporting agricultural produce, and linking Kenya with its neighbors, Uganda and Tanzania. Passenger services continued to connect major towns, including Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, Nakuru, and Eldoret. In 1969, the railway officially became the Kenya Railways Corporation, marking full Kenyan ownership. Alongside the name change, workshops in Nairobi, Mombasa, and Kisumu were expanded and modernized to handle maintenance for the growing fleet of locomotives and rolling stock. These workshops became centers of skill development, training engineers, drivers, and maintenance staff, while also providing jobs for thousands of local residents. Some steam locomotives were retired, but several were preserved for historical and heritage purposes, reminding the nation of the railway's colonial past and early challenges. The railway network covered critical routes across Kenya. The Mombasa-Nairobi line was the biggest, transporting both freight and passengers, serving as the main corridor for goods arriving from the port. The Nairobi-Kisumu line connected the inland agricultural regions to Lake Victoria, supporting both domestic trade and exports. Branch lines such as Nairobi-Nakuru and Nairobi-Eldoret linked smaller towns and agricultural hubs to the main network, while major towns, including Nairobi Station, became central hubs for administration, freight consolidation, and passenger movement. These routes allowed the railway to support not just commerce, but also growth for towns and communities along the tracks. In the 1970s, Kenya Railways embarked on a major modernization program. Diesel locomotives, imported from countries such as Canada and the United Kingdom, replaced older steam engines. Diesel engines offered lower maintenance costs, greater reliability, and the ability to haul longer freight trains, increasing the railway's efficiency. Workshops were upgraded to handle these modern engines, and employees were trained in diesel technology, signaling a shift from traditional methods to more industrial approach. Passenger coaches were also updated to provide safer and more comfortable travel, particularly on the busy lines such as the Express Nairobi-Mombasa. Also, Kenya Railways played a key role in regional trade, operating as a part of East African Railways Corporation (EARC) until the collapse of East African Community in 1977. The EARC coordinated railway operations across Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, allowing free movement of goods and passengers. After the collapse of the community, Kenya Railways had to manage its network independently, creating logistical, financial, and operational pressures. Cross-border trade became more complicated, and maintaining regional connections required new agreements and procedures. Despite modernization, the railway faced persistent infrastructure challenges. Most of the network was narrow gauge, 1000 mm, which limited speed and freight capacity. Aging bridges, tracks, and stations required consistent maintenance, and floods, erosion, and landslides, especially in the Rift Valley and the coastal regions, sometimes disrupted operations. Level crossing accidents and occasional derailments highlighted ongoing safety concerns. Rehabilitation projects were carried out periodically, but limited government resources restricted the railway's ability to fully restore and expand its network. Financial difficulties compounded operational problems. Competition from trucks along Mombasa-Nairobi highway diverted freight away from the railway, while low passenger fares and rising operational costs created persistent budget shortfalls. By the late 1980s, the signs of decline were undeniable. Narrow gauge tracks were in urgent need of repair, passenger services were slower and less reliable, and freight volumes had decreased significantly on key routes. The railway that once carried Kenya's dreams was falling. A bold new plan was coming, bigger, faster, and full of challenges. The era of the SGR was about to begin. By the early 2010s, decades of decline in the old narrow gauge railway had revealed deep limitations. To address these challenges and transform the country's transport backbone, the government of Kenya pursued a bold plan to build a standard gauge railway, SGR, a modern railway line built to international track standards of 1435 mm gauge, capable of carrying heavier loads at higher speeds. In 2013, the government introduced the Railway Development Levy, RDL, a 1.5% tax on all imported goods entering Kenya, specifically designed to help finance railway development and repay loans used to construct the SGR. In 2014, financing and construction agreements were finalized for the first phase of the SGR. The project was largely funded through loans from the Export-Import Bank of China, while the Kenyan government provided additional funding. The cost of constructing the first phase between Mombasa and Nairobi, a distance of about 472 kilometers, was estimated at approximately $3.2 billion, that's about 360 billion Kenyan shillings. The SGR was designed in several phases to eventually connect Kenya with neighboring countries in East Africa. Phase 1A, Mombasa to Nairobi. Phase 2A, Nairobi to Naivasha. Phase 2B, Naivasha to Kisumu. And Phase 2C, planned extension from Kisumu to Malaba, near Malaba border crossing, to eventually connect with rail systems in Uganda. When the cost of the Nairobi-Naivasha extension and other related infrastructure is included, the total expenditure on the SGR project in Kenya rose to roughly 656 billion Kenyan shillings, making it the largest and most expensive infrastructure project in Kenya's history. The construction of the railway was carried out by China Road and Bridge Corporation, CRBC. The first passenger service on the railway, known as the Madaraka Express, was officially launched on 1st June 2017, marking the anniversary of Kenya attaining independence in 1963. Freight operation began on 1st January 2018, allowing cargo from the port to be transported inland more quickly. The engineering of the SGR represented a major technological shift from the colonial era railway. Modern stations were constructed at locations such as Mombasa, Voi, Emali, Athi River, and Nairobi, equipped with modern passenger facilities and signaling systems. New locomotives coaches were introduced, along with large freight yards and container depots designed to improve cargo handling. Operationally, the SGR dramatically reduced travel time between Mombasa and Nairobi. Under the old meter gauge railway, journeys could take up to 10 to 12 hours or more. With the SGR, passenger trains complete the trip in approximately 4 to 5 hours, significantly improving efficiency for both travelers and freight operators. Despite its technological achievements, the management of the SGR quickly became controversial. Instead of being operated directly by the Kenya Railways Corporation, the railway's operations and maintenance were internally managed by Africa Star Railway Operation Company, Afristar, a company associated with the Chinese contractor. This arrangement limited the direct operational control of Kenya Railways during the early years of the railway's operation. Beginning in 2021, Kenya Railways started a gradual process of taking over operations from Afristar. Kenyan staff were trained to operate trains, manage technical systems, and maintain infrastructure. By 2025, Kenya Railways had taken control of approximately 98% of the SGR operations, marking a significant transition toward full local management. The SGR project also became a subject of major legal and political debate. In June 2020, the Court of Appeal of Kenya ruled that the procurement process used to award the construction contract to China Road and Bridge Corporation did not comply with the country's procurement laws, which require competitive tendering for public projects. The ruling raised serious questions about transparency and oversight in the awarding of the railway contract. Financial sustainability also became a key concern. Although the railway generates billions of shillings in revenue each year, operational costs remain high. Reports indicated that the railway costs around 1 billion Kenyan shillings per month, separate from the repayment of the large loans used to finance its construction. Also, repayment of the loans from the Export Bank of China began after a 5-year grace period, which ended around 2020. Since then, Kenya has been required to pay both the principal loan and interest, creating a long-term financial obligation tied to the railway project. Land acquisition for the railway also generated controversy. Large acres of land were acquired along railway corridor between Mombasa and Nairobi, and audits later revealed that taxpayers lost more than 4 billion Kenyan shillings through irregular and compensation deals linked to the project. The construction of the railway also had social consequences for some communities. In several areas, houses and informal settlements located along the planned routes were demolished to make way for the railway line. Disputes over compensation, relocation, and land valuation led to legal battles and criticism from civil society organizations. Despite these challenges, the SGR has become a major part of Kenya's modern transport system. Since its launch, the railway has transported millions of passengers and tens of millions of tons of cargo, significantly reducing pressure on the busy highway between Mombasa and Nairobi. Plans for expanding the railway network continue to shape Kenya's long-term transport strategy. The government has proposed extending the SGR from Naivasha to Kisumu, reconnecting Western Kenya to modern railway network, and improving trade routes around Lake Victoria. Preparations for this extension indicate that construction of the Naivasha-Kisumu segment is expected to begin in March 2026 once financing and approvals are finalized.